Did you know, in medieval Europe, there was a common job where a man might earn more per week than you take home in a month today? It sounds absurd. A worker with no diploma, no computer, no office, pulling in wages that would embarrass a modern professional. But the details of who did this work and why they were paid so obscenely well hide something far darker than a good salary. Why now? Because the medieval labor market is finally being reconstructed from account books that survived 7 centuries. The key players are the master craftsmen, the guilds who controlled them, and one terrifying event that rewrote the price of a human hour. Here's the thing most people never learn. Most coverage stops here. The real story doesn't. Let's start with the money itself. In the 1200s and 1300s, a skilled master mason working on a great cathedral could earn wages that, adjusted for the cost of living, gave him real purchasing power far beyond what an unskilled laborer would ever touch. This mattered because these men built the buildings that still stand today. If you've walked into a Gothic cathedral and felt small, you were feeling the work of a man who was, in his own world, wealthy. Here's what that means for you. Skill was rare, and rarity was priceless. A master mason spent 7 years or more as an apprentice, then years as a journeyman, before he could command top wages. If you're getting something out of this, a like pushes it further. The guilds guarded that path fiercely. They limited how many could enter, which kept wages high and outsiders out. So the medieval building trade wasn't just labor. It was a cartel, and the cartel worked. But the master mason isn't even the highest earner in this story. What comes next is the part that actually matters, because there was one event that made ordinary workers, not just elite craftsmen, suddenly worth a fortune. Its name was the Black Death. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague killed somewhere between a third and half of Europe's population. That is not a statistic you can shrug off. Entire villages emptied. Fields went unharvested because there was nobody left to swing the scythe. And here is the brutal economics of catastrophe. When half your workforce dies, the survivors become priceless. The villain here is the landowning class, the nobles and lords who had spent centuries paying peasants almost nothing, bound to the land, unable to leave. The victims, obviously, were the millions who died, but the survivors, the peasants and laborers who lived, walked out of that graveyard holding something they had never held before: leverage. A common farm worker could now walk to the next manor and demand double his old wage, and if his lord refused, another lord down the road would happily pay it. Suddenly, the man with a sickle had bargaining power that his grandfather could never have dreamed of. This is your stake in the story. Wages are not set by fairness. They are set by scarcity. The plague proved it in the cruelest possible way. Stick with me, the final stretch is the whole point, because the powerful did not accept this quietly. They fought back with the law. In England, in 1349, and again in 1351, the ruling class passed the Ordinance of Labourers and then the Statute of Labourers. These laws did something staggering. They made it illegal to pay a worker more than his pre-plague wage. They made it illegal for a worker to even ask for more. They made it illegal to refuse work if a lord demanded it. In effect, the government froze wages by force to protect the profits of the wealthy. Think about what that means. The market said workers were worth more. The law said, no, we forbid it. This is one of the earliest wage control laws in recorded European history, and it was written not to help workers, but to crush them. The number in this story that genuinely stopped me is this. The plague killed as many as 50 million people across Europe. 50 million. And the response of the ruling class was not grief. It was a wage freeze. But you cannot legislate away the laws of supply and demand forever. The workers pushed back. They took illegal wages in secret. They fled to towns where they could disappear and start fresh. Some walked off the land entirely, and the resentment kept building until, in 1381, it exploded into the peasants' revolt. Tens of thousands marched on London. They burned records. They demanded the end of serfdom itself. The revolt was crushed and its leaders executed, but the door had been opened and it would never fully close again. Here is the payoff, the thing almost nobody connects. That medieval job that paid more than your salary today, whether the elite master mason or the suddenly priceless plague-era laborer, wasn't well paid because society was generous. It was well paid because death made human labor rare. Serfdom in England withered in the decades that followed, not because lords grew kind, but because they could no longer hold workers who now knew their own value. The plague, the single greatest catastrophe in European history, accidentally handed ordinary people the first real wage negotiation of their lives. Here is my prediction, looking at history. Every time a labor force becomes scarce, whether by plague, by war, or by anything else, wages rise and the powerful reach for the law to stop it. That pattern has repeated for 700 years. Watch for it. It is happening in your lifetime too. Before I go, here is your historical footnote of the day. It matters because it shows how far the rich would go to keep control. In 1363, England passed sumptuary laws that dictated exactly what clothing each class was allowed to wear. Peasants growing suddenly wealthy from plague wages had started dressing above their station, in fine cloth and bright colors. The nobility found this intolerable, so they made it illegal for a common man to wear certain furs, fabrics, or the color purple. You could earn the money, you just weren't allowed to look like you had. The law policed the very threads on your back. That is your footnote for today. If the plague-era wage freeze surprised you, remember that the master mason who built your favorite cathedral was, in his day, rich beyond a peasant's imagination. That's it for today. Subscribe to Weird History. There's a new one every day.